If you thought your family dinners were bad, just wait until this week's episode of House of the Dragon. Just try to do a better job at holding your tongue than Aemond. With only 3 more episodes left, House of the Dragon ramps up toward the finale, and oh my god, how is he still alive? For those of you new here, this is a deep dive into the episode, its connection to Game of Thrones, and completely inappropriate memes.
He can keep his tongue.
It's the one and only Digo.
Goddamn right.
And don't worry, this video contains no book spoilers beyond this episode. So come back with me to King's Landing where everything is perfect and absolutely nothing can go wrong. It's been 6 years since Rhaenys last saw her husband, Lord of the Tides, Corlys Velaryon. After the death of his son and daughter, it seems as though he's set his eyes on conquest. Remember, this is a man who said history remembers names, not blood, and he solidified his name and wealth through his 9 great voyages. And what better way to take out the anger for the loss of your children by slaying some pirates? Unfortunately for Corlys, it's landed him with a grave injury after he was ambushed. He survived a hit by a corsair's dagger, but has fallen gravely ill to fever. In the book, there's no such ambush, he just gets a fever and doesn't fully recover for almost 3 years. Regardless, this whole event calls into question who gets Driftmark after he passes. Now, this shouldn't even be an issue. Corlys has made it clear his grandson Lucerys is to be Lord of the Tides after his passing, even though we'll later find out from Master of Laws, Jasper Wilde, that Corlys has never officially stated this. Last episode, Corlys told young Luke that Driftmark is one day to be his, and even doubled down on his decision when Rhaenys offered another option, that of Baela taking over. This whole debacle would have been an open and shut case if it weren't for those like Daemon Velaryon questioning the legitimacy of Luke's birthright, believing him not to be the legitimate son of Laenor, rather that of Harwin Strong. In Daemon's mind, Driftmark should remain in the hands of a Velaryon and not a bastard. Rhaenys even tells him to watch his tongue, for what he's saying is tantamount to treason. The Raven telling of Corlys' injury was received by Maester Kelvin, a character created for the show and loyal to House Velaryon. It came from Evenfall, which is about a 3-day journey south of Driftmark. Evenfall Hall is the home of House Tarth and where Brienne of Tarth was trained. Just don't tell Tormund. Behind Rhaenys is her granddaughter Baela, who has assumed the position of ward. At face value, it seems a kind gesture so that the queen who never was gets to spend time with her granddaughter, but it's far more strategic. It allows Daemon and Rhaenyra to have eyes and ears on what's happening in Driftmark, for it is Baela who warns her father of Daemon's plan to usurp Luke from the Driftwood throne. Daemon essentially tells his sister-in-law that he'll do this with or without her help. He has much stronger allies who would be sympathetic to his plight. It's far better for the Hightowers to have Daemon on the Driftwood throne than Rhaenyra's son Luke, and he even tells them in secret if he were to have Driftmark, he would forever be in their debt. Among the crevices of Dragonstone, Daemon descends into the caves to find 3 new eggs from Rhaenyra's dragon Syrax. Remember that Dragonstone was built around an active volcano called Dragonmont, making it the perfect lair for several wild or riderless dragons. In the book, before the event known as the Dance of Dragons, 6 wild or semi-wild dragons called Dragonmont home. Most of these we haven't seen yet, like the Cannibal, Grey Ghost, Sheepstealer, Silverwing, and Vermithor, but Seasmoke, whose rider Laenor faked his own death, resides there now too. I hope you like your eggs black and gooey. These 3 are a perfect match for Rhaenyra and Daemon's 3 new children. Since we last saw them, Rhaenyra has given birth to 2 boys with a 3rd child on the way, and these eggs will undoubtedly be reserved for them. We get to see these boys later on in the episode, and it is said Alicent grew angry when she learned that Rhaenyra had also named one of her children Aegon. Their second-born they named Viserys after the king himself. Daemon gives the eggs over to the dragon tamers, who also have these really sweet dragonglass daggers, dragonglass being native to the island and one of a few materials that could kill White Walkers. It seems having Baela as Rhaenys' ward has paid off, as she sends word of Daemon's plan to usurp the Driftwood throne. I tried my best to decipher the message, and this is what I got. Father, I write with news of Uncle Aemond, who this moment sails for King's Landing. He plans to blank his grace the king in matters of succession, rights, and the sanctity of blood. He wishes for the Driftwood throne to pass to him that is his by rights, and that he is the only untainted choice. Meanwhile, Jace is having as much trouble learning High Valyrian as I did high school French. Training him is Maester Gerardus, who we saw briefly last episode at Daemon and Rhaenyra's wedding. In the book, he becomes becomes a more important character, so keep your eye on him. We also get the briefest glimpse of Joffrey Velaryon, who we saw as a baby in episode 6. I really liked how Jace is trying his best to learn, even though it's quite difficult, with him saying a king should honor the traditions of his forebears. Remember that at this moment, Jace is second in line to the throne after his mother. Daemon comes bearing the bad news from Driftmark. Aemond is on his way to King's Landing to make common cause with the Hightowers, and they just can't let that happen. So for the first time in 6 years, the Targaryens head back to the Red Keep to put a stop to this nonsense once and for all. And just like no one was there to greet the king at Driftmark in episode 5, no one's there to greet Rhaenyra, the future friggin' queen. There is an exception, however. Lord Caswell, who we saw briefly in episode 6, congratulate the princess on her child. The pitiful greeting is a calculated move by Otto, who will later tell Sir Harold Westerling he trusts the princess was welcomed in a manner befitting her station. As Daemon will later note, there have been a few changes to the Red Keep since we last saw it. Many of the Targaryen heraldry has been taken down and replaced with religious symbols like the 7-pointed star. We'll see Alicent wear a 7-pointed star necklace. She's always been a bit religious, as we saw her pray in episode 2. It's also a good strategic move, as the Faith of the Seven is Westeros' dominant religion, and her piety and righteousness will curry favor among the common folk. Alicent seems to be leading the small council on her husband's behalf. In attendance are Lord Lyman Beesbury, Master of Coin, Lord Tywin Lannister, Master of Ships, Grand Maester Orwyle, Hand of the King Otto Hightower, and this guy, Lord Jasper Wilde, Master of Laws. The big topic of conversation is Driftmark, and we kinda get a sense of which members of the council are Team Alicent, the Greens, or Team Rhaenyra, the Blacks. Lord Wilde, who coincidentally wears green here, is all for Vaemond taking control of Driftmark, while Lord Beesbury, wearing black, believes the matter has already been settled. Luke is Laenor's son and should get the throne. It's pretty safe to say that the council looks pretty stacked in Alicent's favor, and the name of the next episode is even called the Green Council, so things aren't looking too great if you're Rhaenyra. The matter of Driftmark will be settled tomorrow when Otto and Alicent will hear all the claimants. But where is the king? Let's just say the man is one step from becoming a dead ringer for the Crypt Keeper. His giant model of High Valyria is covered in cobwebs, and the drapes covering the king's bed look like these webs as well. We've seen this model become a metaphor for Viserys' life. As it comes to completion, so too does his life. That's gonna be one hell of a thing to remove when he dies. So Daemon and Rhaenyra visit the king, who they haven't seen for years, and Daemon wastes no time getting straight to business. Vaemond is about to usurp his grandson's claim to Driftmark. At first the king's like, oh, Otto will take care of it, but he doesn't really comprehend the extent the Hightowers are undermining his rule. I was also interested to see just how far gone the king's mental capacity had gone, considering last episode he called Alicent Emma. The king is also introduced to his grandchildren, Aegon and Viserys, but when they start crying it's like migraine city for the king. He asks for his special tea, which Daemon later investigates and believes to be milk of the poppy, a drink used to ease pain. This tea can also cause hallucinations, dreams, and sleepiness, which is great if you're the Hightowers and want to rule the kingdom while the king slowly dies. We'll see the king refuse this tea multiple times later in the episode, for he wants to be as alert as possible during the hearings and his final supper. The queen is notified of a delicate situation involving her son Aegon. This is told to her by member of the Kingsguard, Sir Eric Cargill, not to be confused with Eric Cargill, his twin brother, who also happens to be a member of the Kingsguard. Just to make it a little easier, here are the two at the UK premiere of House of the Dragon. Talia, one of Alicent's trusted handmaidens, has brought forth another handmaiden by the name of Diana. In order not to get demonetized, let's just say Aegon overextended his royal powers. This scene really shows us just how far Alicent is willing to go to protect her children, essentially threatening this young girl who has gone through an absolutely traumatic experience and then buying her off with some gold. Now we do know Aegon has always had eyes for the ladies. This was set up all the way in episode 6 when he'd rather focus on the handmaidens than his swordplay. The servants even scurry away from him, foreshadowing just how creepy he is. Diana is also given some of that sweet moon tea, the same tea given to Rhaenyra at the end of episode 4, which is set to get rid of any unwanted pregnancies. In the book, Aegon is said to have fathered 2 bastard children, one from a girl whose maidenhood he won at auction on the Street of Silk, and the other one of his mother's maidservants. So it looks like Diana's story here is plucked straight from the book. Alicent has to chastise her son in yet another awkward scene where he's naked, and it seems Alicent is more concerned on the shame Aegon has brought upon her and his now sister wife Helena than the actual act he committed. She even goes so far as to say he's no son of hers, which is pretty funny considering she's gone through all this shit to just put him on the throne. But for Aegon, it seems no matter how hard he tries, he'll never be good enough for her and father. Helena comes in for a brief moment and Alicent gives her a huge hug, almost as if to say, you don't deserve this. Rhaenyra and Daemon meet with the Queen for the first time since Alicent slashed her forearm at Driftmark. A small price to pay considering Aemond lost his eye, an even smaller price to pay for gaining a dragon. Daemon is concerned the king is being kept addled by milk of the poppy and that the Hightowers have become the de facto rulers of the kingdom. This is even more concerning considering it will be Otto who makes the decision on who will become heir to Driftmark. Hardly fair. Alicent understands this and says the father will be just. It's a kind of play on words, the father referring to one of the 7 faces of the 7 who are one, the god followed by those of the faith, and her actual father. In the faith, the father represents justice. Here's a bit of trivia for this episode. There are 3 other faces mentioned in this episode, 1 by Rhaenys and 2 by Viserys. Can you name them? I'll have the answers near the end of the video. Jace and Luke head to the courtyard where Harwin Strong beat up Sir Criston many moons ago, and everyone is looking at them like they're outsiders. A, they haven't been seen in King's Landing for years, and B, they believe Jace and Luke to be bastards. No doubt rumor has spread around the keep that the issue of Driftmark will be brought up tomorrow, and thus Luke's legitimacy. Luke says no one would question him being heir if he looked more like Laenor, but Jace tells him it doesn't matter what the people think. This echoes the exact same thing Rhaenyra said of the people in episode 4.
Their wants are of no consequence.
Of note is this chunk in the wall that Luke made when he stole Sir Criston's Morningstar. Speaking of that Morningstar, Sir Criston trains with a much more adept Aemond, who actually bests him. In the book, it said that, quote, despite the loss of his eye, Aemond became a proficient and dangerous swordsman under the tutelage of Sir Criston Cole, but remained a wild and willful child, hot-tempered and unforgiving. We'll definitely get to see this wild and hot temper manifest later in the episode. It's gotta be pretty scary meeting Aemond, since the last time these two saw their uncle, Luke had torn out his eye. But before anything can go down, they're interrupted by the arrival of Vaemond Velaryon, and Vaemond looks at Luke like, I'm gonna rip your head off! In a private meeting, Vaemond entreats the Hand and the Queen to name him heir. After all, with war on the horizon, would they want a child commanding their fleet of ships? Remember that the Triarchy, who Vaemond himself battled alongside his brother, nephew, and Daemon, has allied itself with Dorne, so war could break out at any time. At Driftmark with an indebted Vaemond at the helm would be far more advantageous to the Hightowers than Luke. I also like how the director chose to frame Alicent here, almost as if she's some caged bird. Remember in episode 4, Rhaenyra equated Alicent to being imprisoned in a castle, having to squeeze out heirs. Like many important conversations throughout the season, we have Rhaenyra and Rhaenys in front of the weirwood tree. It is said that the old gods watch through the carved faces on their trunks, which is why important ceremonies are often held in front of them, like the Oath of the Night's Watch for example. Rhaenyra has come with an offer. Back Luke's claim to Driftmark and she will betroth Jace and Luke to Baela and Rhaena. Baela would become Queen of the Seven Kingdoms and her children heirs to the throne, while Rhaena will rule in Driftmark as Luke's wife. This is all kind of ironic since Rhaenyra once accused her own father of using her as a political pawn to be married off. Now she's doing the same thing. This is a desperate tactic by Rhaenyra, who did the same thing in episode 6, offering Jace's hand in marriage to Helena, an offer which Alicent rejected. But Rhaenys isn't going to accept this outright. She believes, after all, that Rhaenyra and Daemon had Laenor killed so that they could wed. I mean, it doesn't look good when the day after Laenor is killed, they elope in secret. And just like Rhaenyra swore on the memory of her mother that her maidenhood was still intact, a big fat lie, she does the same thing to Rhaenys here, swearing on her mother's memory she did not kill Laenor. And technically, she's right. He's probably hitting up the hottest new clubs in Essos. Also fun to note here that Rhaenys is wearing black, a little nod to what side she's likely to back. Unsure of whether Rhaenys will accept her offer, Rhaenyra visits her ailing father. If he so believed in Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy that a Targaryen will need to be on the throne to unite the realm against a great threat, why did he name her heir and further divide the realm? She essentially tells her father that if he wishes her to bear the burden of the crown, then he must man up and defend her. An ominous thunderstorm foreshadows what's to come. We even see a rat on the Valyrian model. These rats have proven to be ill omens in episodes past, like the ones we saw before Rhaenyra had her night on the Street of Silk, the one who drank blood at Laenor and Rhaenyra's wedding, or the one who scampered in Viserys' chamber before the deaths of Harwin and Lionel Strong. As the king's bandages are prepped, we get to see just how bad the king's health has declined, and he asks Otto to arrange supper for everyone tomorrow evening since this is a special occasion where his entire family will finally be together. The next day, Otto, acting on the king's behalf, oversees the matter of Driftmark. It's a sham hearing with the Hightowers knowing full well they'll support Aemond. Aemond begins by talking about how Valyrian blood goes even further back than the Targaryens when it comes to settling in Westeros, and that he is the closest kin to Corlys. But Rhaenyra fires back that the same blood courses through the veins of her children, and Aemond only cares about his own ambition. Rhaenyra barely begins her claim when the Great Hall is interrupted by the king himself, who's like,
You thought I was dead?
he's got this sick gold mask, which we'll later see covers a missing eye and cheek. For Alicent's sake, I hope he's stopped with those late night booty calls. The journey to sit on the throne is extremely taxing for someone in the king's condition, and there's a heartwarming moment where his brother helps him up and even puts his crown on his head. Daemon's always wanted just to be by his brother's side. For the king, Driftmark is a settled matter, and the only person who can offer any additional insight is Rhaenys. And Rhaenys sides with Rhaenyra, telling everyone in attendance that it was always her and Corlys' wish that Driftmark passed to Laenor and his trueborn son, Luke. But we kinda know this is bullshit, at least on Rhaenys' part, since she tried to convince Corlys to make Baela heir and not Luke. Rhaenys goes one step further and announces the betrothal of Jace and Luke with Baela and Rhaena. It was just hilarious to see Alicent and Otto's faces here, but check out Aegon's. He lets out this slight grin. I think for Aegon it's fun to see someone sticking it to his mom. So the king settles the matter that Luke is to remain heir to the Driftwood throne, but Vaemond stomps in and I'm like,
Quiet, he's gonna say something.
Vaemond won't allow the king to dictate how his house is run, and for a non-Valyrian to take over. As his temper rises, Daemon is just chomping at the bit for Vaemond to say those treasonous lines.
Did you say it? Our children. Say it. Bastards!
And faster than you can say Ned Stark, Vaemond is beheaded. Everyone is in complete shock, but death was certain for Vaemond after his outbursts. Daemon just got to it first, cutting him with his Valyrian steel sword, Dark Sister. In the book, this event doesn't happen in such a public setting. Basically, Rhaenyra heard Vaemond was talking shit and had Daemon cut off his head and feed his body to Caraxes. You may have also noticed how Aemond looks at Daemon here. The two will share another odd semi-showdown later in the episode. If you've read the book, you'll know what's to come of these two, but this is a non-spoiler review. Just know that the showrunners here are already starting to sprinkle in little hints at things to come. This whole ordeal has made the king incredibly tired. If you listen closely, you can barely make out him saying the line, "I must put things right." In the book, King Viserys is depicted in his old age as being fat and red of face, so what we see in the show is certainly a departure. And take a look at this brilliant blacks versus the greens juxtaposition here. The Silent Sisters prepare Vaemond's body to be sent back to Driftmark. You may remember the Silent Sisters as having performed rituals over the body of Hand of the King Jon Arryn in episode 1 of Game of Thrones. Master Orwyle recommends that Rhaenys not look upon the body for fear the Stranger may visit her. The Stranger is one of those 7 faces I talked about earlier and leads the dead to the other world. And what better way to celebrate than a post-beheading feast? We have the greens on the left and the blacks on the right, and I love this shot of Alicent and Rhaenyra apart from one another with an image of King's Landing in the center. These two women are fighting for its control, and this is exactly how I want to arrive at dinner. He's even got a sweet dragon cane. The prayer before dinner seems to be something new, and the king prays to the 2 other faces of the 7, the mother and the smith. The mother offers love and protection, something he wants for all his children, and the smith is the mender of broken things, so of course he wants Alicent and Rhaenyra to mend their relationship. The king toasts to Jace and Luke and their newly betrothed, and Aegon is like,
Well done, Jace. You'll finally get to lie with a woman.
well, Aegon, at least he'll be able to lay with a woman consensually. You'll see that Otto here does not drink to this toast, the little bitter bitch that he is. And the king, doing his best Phantom of the Opera impression, takes off his mask to reveal just how bad things are. He wants all of them to see him for what he is, and he knows his time is running out. If the crown is to remain strong, they will need to set aside their grievances, and for a moment it looks like there's a hint of reconciliation. They are both mothers who love their children and have more in common than they allow. Alicent even says Rhaenyra will make a fine queen, if only their kids could take notes from their mothers. Aegon tells Baela if Jace doesn't satisfy her, she knows who to go to, which almost sparks a brawl, and meanwhile Helena's just randomly playing with a bug at the table. She'll later toast to Baela and Laena, saying marriage isn't that bad, your husband will most likely ignore you unless he's drunk. So yeah, that doesn't paint the greatest of pictures for her marriage with Aegon. I did like it how she then asked Jace to dance, just to stick it to Prince Scumbag. And for a very brief moment, the king looks at his family and sees that all is relatively well. This is the last moment he'll have with them before he dies, and it's probably a good thing considering how things go downhill after he leaves. Now, we don't actually get visual confirmation the king dies this episode, but I think it's pretty safe to say so. With the king clocked out for the night, a pig is brought before Aemond, a fun jab at the prince who was once gifted the pig Pink Dread when he never had a dragon. For Aemond, this is the last straw. He toasts to the boys, calling them handsome, wise, and strong, a play on words for being Harwin Strong's bastards. And Luke, like father like son, gets smashed into a table. As the dust settles, Rhaenyra thinks it's best they return to Dragonstone, but Alicent says she's only just arrived, and I actually found this to be quite genuine. So Rhaenyra agrees, she'll drop the kids off back home and then come back via dragon. It's probably a good call since her father could pass any day, and she'll be required to ascend the throne upon his death. In the book, this plays out a little differently, but I'll get to that next episode. Meanwhile, somewhere in King's Landing, Talia meets with the White Worm Mysaria, essentially confirming that she is one of the White Worm's spies. And it looks like Mysaria has really made a name for herself, in nice clothes, a nice home, and Talia even refers to her as Lady. Whether this means she's married a noble or is just super rich is yet to be determined. Mysaria has already learned that it's been quite the night at the castle. Perhaps this was picked up by another one of her spies. Now, Talia was a character created just for the show, so there's not much we can glean from the book here on what's going on. However, I do have my theories which I'll save for my preview breakdown. With the king on his last legs, Alicent gives him some tea to ease the pain. I love this shot showing one side of his face with his mask in the foreground. Now, the king is pretty delusional here and starts talking about Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy, but Alicent thinks he's talking about their son, Aegon. Remember that Alicent wouldn't know anything about this prophecy, since it's a secret passed only from heir to heir. While referencing Aegon's dream, he says things like, "It is you, you are the one, you must do this," and he also apologizes for something, that of which we don't know. Alicent's gonna interpret this as the king changing his mind on who should be king, and after he says, "You must do this," she says, "I understand, my king." So we can basically throw out any of that reconciliation we thought we could have between Alicent and Rhaenyra. She leaves the king and he reaches up towards something, with his last words being, "my love." I like to think that in his delirium he's reaching for Aemma. We know that Aemma has always been Viserys' true love. Even while married to Alicent, he kept her ring and would kiss it. So if the king is in fact dead, which I believe he is, you can see how it'll be a bit strange with Rhaenyra having just left King's Landing, giving the Hightowers a bit of a head start should they choose to steal the throne. With Rhaenyra potentially on a ship for several days, then having to come back, who knows how long it will be before she actually finds out her dad has passed. If you're asking me, the Dance of the Dragons is about to begin, marking one of the bloodiest time periods in all of Westerosi history. I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing to the channel, as I'll be covering the whole thing. Stay tuned for my preview breakdown and let me know what you thought of the episode. Until next time, remember,
He can keep his tongue.